Hello, welcome to today's webinar on family benefits. This information meeting is intended for foreign parents residing in Slovakia, and during the next approximately 60 minutes, we will talk about a variety of allowances and benefits to which you as a parents are entitled. First of all, let us briefly explain basic rules of this webinar. The webinar will be held in English and it will be recorded. Please keep your cameras and microphones turned off throughout the session. You can write your questions in the chat after the presentation. You can send your questions that we won't have the time to answer to our email mic@iom.int. You can also contact us by email with questions that you do not want to write publicly in the chat. Let us remind you that the webinar will cover basic information and general questions about family benefits. In case of more detailed questions and precise calculations of individual benefits, we recommend that you contact the relevant Office of Labour, Social Affairs and Family or a branch of the Social Insurance Agency. Thank you for your understanding. Before we get to the family benefits themselves, we would like to inform you about the activities of the Migration Information Centre, which was founded in Bratislava in 2006. The mission of our centre is to help foreigners with their integration in Slovakia. Our services are available to nationals of countries outside the European Union, persons with a temporary, permanent or tolerated residence, as well as applicants for residence in Slovakia. Migration Information Centre also provides its services to Slovak citizens who help foreigners as well as cultural mediators or representatives of foreign communities in Slovakia. We provide free legal advice, especially in matters of residence, employment, business or citizenship, as well as employment and social counseling. Within our educational support, we provide financial contributions for educational and retraining courses and organize open courses of the Slovak language and social cultural orientation. As already mentioned, we cooperate with representatives of foreign communities or community mediators. If you are interested in this form of cooperation, you have new ideas and want to help foreigners with their start in Slovakia, please visit the website of the Migration Information Centre at www.mic.iom.sk, where you can find more information in the section Cooperation with Communities. As we have already mentioned, tonight we will be talking about various benefits that you can claim if you live in Slovakia and have children. We will talk about one social insurance benefit, one form of a tax benefit, as well as about several state social benefits.
The first benefit we will be dealing with today is a maternity benefit. A maternity benefit is a social insurance benefit. It is a benefit paid from your sickness insurance, so you may only be entitled to this benefit if you are covered by sickness insurance and at the same time if you meet other conditions. A person entitled to receive maternity benefit is primarily the mother of the child, but in specific cases, maternity benefit may also be received by another insured person, such as the father of the child, mother's husband, father's wife, or another person to whose care the child has been entrusted. In order to be able to receive this benefit, you must meet several conditions. In the first place, you must be pregnant or take care of a newborn child. The second condition is that when your entitlement to this benefit arises, you must have valid sickness insurance or be in the so-called protection period after the end of your sickness insurance. What does that mean? You have compulsory sickness insurance if you are employed or if you are self-employed. In addition, you can also sign up for sickness insurance voluntarily if you are at least 16 years old, have residency in Slovakia, and do not receive pension. The protection period after the end of your sickness insurance usually lasts 7 days. However, if the duration of your sickness insurance has been shorter, your protection period will have the same duration as your sickness insurance had. And the third option, if your sickness insurance expires during your pregnancy, then your protection period is 8 months long. So once again, The second condition is that you must either have valid sickness insurance or be within the protection period. The third condition is that you must have at least 270 days of sickness insurance in the last 2 years before your entitlement arises. If you are a self-employed person, you also need to have your social insurance premiums paid in the correct amount from the beginning of your sickness insurance until the end of the calendar month preceding the month in which you become entitled to the benefit. If you are an employee, you may not receive income from the same source from which you are claiming the benefit while receiving it. As I already mentioned, one of the conditions for receiving maternity benefit is valid sickness insurance when your entitlement to the benefit arises. If you are a mother, this entitlement arises usually 6 weeks before the expected due date, or 8 weeks before the expected due date at the earliest, or from the delivery in case of preterm birth. Another insured person's entitlement arises when they take the child into their care. The application for maternity benefit is to be submitted to the branch of the social insurance agency responsible for your social insurance. In case you are an employee, this will be the branch competent for your employer. If you are a self-employed person, you apply at the branch competent according to the place of your residence. The application form is not freely available. It will be issued to a pregnant woman by her doctor and to another insured person directly by the social insurance agency. If you are an employee, don't forget to have the form confirmed by your employer. The amount of the maternity benefit equals 75% of the daily assessment basis. The daily assessment basis is calculated by a relatively complicated method and slightly differently for employees than for self-employed persons, but in general we can say that the maternity benefit represents 75% of your gross salary in the previous calendar year. The maximum amount of benefit in 2020 is €1,498.70 in a 30-day month and €1,548.70 in a 31-day month. Finally, let's talk about for how long this benefit can be received. A mother is generally entitled to maternity benefit for 34 weeks. A lone mother is entitled to 37 weeks, and a mother who gave birth to 2 or more children for 43 weeks. Another insured person is entitled to maternity benefit for 28 weeks if he or she is lone, for 31 weeks, and if he or she has taken care of 2 or more children, 37 weeks. One very important thing to add, to mention, is that if the mother doesn't apply for maternity benefit as soon as she has the right to it, which is usually 6 weeks before the expected date of childbirth, after the childbirth she will be entitled to receive the benefit only for the remaining number of weeks as another insured person. In other words, if the childbirth doesn't happen earlier than expected, but the mother decides to claim the benefit, let's say 2 weeks before the expected date, after giving birth, she will be entitled to only 28 weeks of maternity benefit, and therefore she will be receiving the benefit for a total of 30, not 34 weeks, because she voluntarily decided not to apply for the benefit as soon as she was entitled to it.
In the following part of the webinar, we will talk about state social benefits. You may become entitled to these allowances if you meet legal conditions, regardless of whether you worked, did business, or were insured in any way before your entitlement. Applications for these allowances are submitted to the Office of Labour, Social Affairs and Family, and the claim can be made for 6 months retroactively. You can find all the necessary forms on the website of the Central Office of Labour. When we talk about the documents to be submitted together with your application for a particular allowance, you may notice that some documents are repeated, for instance, a birth certificate of the child. If you submit a certain document with one application, the officers should not request the same document from you again when you apply for another allowance. The first state social benefit discussed today will be the parental allowance. It is a state social benefit by which the state contributes to the entitled person to ensure due care for the child. A person entitled to receive the allowance may be the child's parent or the spouse of the child's parent if he or she lives in the same household as the parent, or the person to whose care the child has been entrusted. You can receive parental allowance until the child reaches 3 years of age or 6 years if the child has a long-term unfavorable health condition or has been entrusted to alternative care. The conditions for receiving parental allowance are: first, due care of the child. By due care, we mean in particular the provision of adequate nutrition, hygiene, upbringing of the child, and the observance of preventive medical checkups. And secondly, permanent or temporary residence of the entitled person in Slovakia, regardless of the activity he or she performs. As I mentioned, receiving parental allowance is not conditioned by previous contributions to any system. Parental allowance is granted to the same person only once, even if he or she has more than one child under the age of 3, and is provided to only one eligible person, even if both parents meet the conditions for entitlement. You will not be entitled to parental allowance if you and the child are staying outside the territory of the European Union and you do not have compulsory public health insurance in Slovakia. If you are entitled to a maternity allowance in Slovakia or in another EU country, provided that the maternity benefit is higher than the amount of the parental allowance. However, if you receive a maternity benefit in a lower amount, you are entitled to a compensation for the difference between the amount of parental allowance and the maternity benefit you receive. Further, you are not entitled to parental allowance if you receive a benefit similar to the maternity or parental allowance outside the European Union or Switzerland, and if your another child is entrusted to alternative care. The amount of parental allowance is €270 monthly if you did not receive maternity benefit before receiving the parental allowance, and €370 monthly if you received maternity benefit before. If you give birth to more than one child at a time, the amount of the allowance is increased by 25% for each subsequent child. The application must be submitted together with following documents: passport, Slovak residence card, birth certificate of the child, confirmation on your entitlement to maternity benefit abroad. If you were entitled to maternity benefit in Slovakia, this confirmation is not required, as the office will request it directly from the social insurance agency. Then affidavit on the fact that the other parent is not receiving a maternity benefit, and a document proving another decisive fact such as alternative care, long-term unfavorable health condition, marriage with the child's parent, or health insurance in Slovakia.
I will start with the second social benefit, which is childcare allowance. By this contribution, the state contributes to the coverage of expenses incurred for the childcare. A person entitled to receive this allowance is the child's parent or the person to whose care the child has been entrusted. The allowance can be received for the care of a child under 3 years of age or up to 6 years of age if the child has a long-term unfavorable health condition or has been entrusted to alternative care. In order to receive this allowance, you must meet 3 conditions. First of all, you must be employed or self-employed or study full-time at a secondary school or university. The second condition is that the child care must be provided in Slovakia, either in the family environment of the child or another natural person, or in an environment that is designated to provide child care, for example, a kindergarten or a nursery. The third condition is that both you and the child must have a permanent or temporary residence in Slovakia. You are not entitled to child care allowance if you are receiving a maternity benefit or parental allowance. Therefore, if you as a parent are not entitled to maternity benefit or your entitlement to maternity benefit expired, You must decide whether you apply for parental allowance or for childcare allowance. It is not possible to receive both at the same time. The amount of the allowance for each child depends on the way in which the care is provided. First, it may be in the amount of demonstrated expenses, up to a maximum of €280 if the child is placed in a private nursery or cared for by another person who provides care as a self-employed person. Or it can be the amount of monthly contributions, up to a maximum of €80 if the care is provided in a kindergarten established by a municipality or by a local state administration body. And the third option is if the care is provided by another natural person, for example, a grandparent, or by yourself, then the allowance is €41.10. The application for this allowance must be submitted with a number of documents, which you can currently see on the screen. It is a passport, your residence card, the residence card of your child, birth certificate of the child, proof of performance of either gainful activity or studies. Then also, if you are a self-employed person, you must add a confirmation on your compulsory pension insurance. Another document that you must enclose is a confirmation on your entitlement to maternity benefit abroad. Again, if you are entitled to maternity benefit in Slovakia, this confirmation is not required, as the office will request it directly from the social insurance agency. Another document is an agreement or decision on the provision of childcare, for example, an agreement with the nursery. If this agreement or decision doesn't contain the amount of expenses, you will also have to enclose a confirmation of this fact. And in case another decisive fact is relevant, such as an alternative care or long-term unfavorable health condition, you must submit that as well. And the final document is an affidavit on your bank account, which can be downloaded from the website of the Central Office of Labor.
Another state social benefit that we will talk about is a child allowance. The child allowance is a state social benefit by which the state contributes to the education and nutrition needs of a dependent child. A person entitled to this allowance is a parent of the child, the person to whose care the child is entrusted, and where applicable, the adult dependent child, if he or she has no parents, holds a modified maintenance obligation, is married, or his marriage has terminated. The allowance can be received for a child first until the end of compulsory schooling, even if the child is exempted from the obligation to attend school, or until reaching the age of 25 if he or she is studying full-time at a secondary school or university, until obtaining a second-level university education, what means a master degree, or if he or she cannot study or perform a gainful activity due to illness or injury. Or the third option, until reaching the age of majority, if the child is unable to study or perform a gainful activity due to a long-term unfavorable health condition. However, if the child is granted an invalidity pension, entitlement to this allowance does not arise. The conditions for receiving the allowance are two. First one is the childcare, and the second one is permanent or temporary residence of the entitled person in Slovakia. You do not become entitled to this allowance if your child is provided with care in a social and legal protection facility for children or in a special educational facility. Further, if your child is held in custody or serving a prison sentence, or if you and the child reside outside the EU and you do not have a compulsory public health insurance in Slovakia. The amount of allowance is €24.95 per month for each child. In the calendar month in which the child enters the first year of elementary school, the allowance is increased by €102.50. After the child reaches the age of 3 until the beginning of the compulsory school attendance, you are obliged to notify the office in writing on how the care to a child will be provided. The application must be submitted together with the following documents: passport, Slovak residence card, birth certificate of the child, document proving another decisive fact, notification on the provision of care, This applies to children from the age of 3 until the start of compulsory schooling, and a confirmation on attending a high school or university abroad, together with a document on the equivalence of studies abroad and confirmation specifying studies attended. Let's talk about supplementary child allowance. The supplementary child allowance is a state social benefit by which the state contributes to the upbringing and maintenance of a dependent child, for which the tax bonus cannot be applied. We will talk about what a tax bonus is and who is entitled to it at the end of this presentation. A person entitled to this allowance is the person who is entitled to a child allowance if he or she meets the following conditions. First, he or she is receiving a pension or a care allowance. Then he or she is not engaged in a gainful activity, and neither is another person who can claim a tax bonus. It's usually the second parent. And the third condition is that no tax bonus has been granted for the child. The amount of the allowance is €11.70 per month. The application must be submitted together with following documents. You will need passport, residence card, the latest decision on awarding a pension, and a confirmation of public health insurance in Slovakia if the applicant and the child are outside the European Union.
The next allowance is different from the previous ones, as this one is paid only once and not monthly as the allowances we discussed so far. By childbirth allowance, the state contributes to cover the expenses connected with the provision of the necessary needs of a newborn. A person entitled to receive this allowance is a mother who gave birth, or a father of the child if the mother has died, if she is searched for, or the child was entrusted into his care. In order to receive this allowance, you must meet two conditions. First, a child must be born, and you as the entitled person must have permanent residence as well as the actual domicile in Slovakia. Therefore, you cannot apply for this allowance if you have a temporary residence. You may be asking what it means in practice to have an actual domicile in Slovakia. The actual domicile is the place where you and your child have your most important interests. Assessing whether your actual domicile is really in Slovakia is carried out on the basis of several criteria, such as the length of your stay, performance of gainful activity, compulsory public health insurance, provision of health care, living with your family, your children attending a preschool facility or school, and so on. As a mother, you will not be entitled to this allowance if you do not attend monthly preventive checkups at your doctor from the 4th month of your pregnancy until the childbirth, or if you leave the medical facility after giving birth without proper discharge from the attending physician. In general, whether you are a mother or a father, you will not be entitled to this allowance if you didn't insure a doctor for your child, if you agreed to the adoption of the child before claiming this allowance, if this child or one of your older children have been entrusted to alternative care, if you received a similar benefit in the country of birth of the child, if the child was born out of Slovakia, and also if you are a minor and have no granted parental rights and responsibilities. The amount of the allowance is €829.86 per child from the 1st to 3rd birth if the child has lived for at least 28 days, and €151.37 per child from the 4th birth on, or if the child from the 1st to 3rd birth did not live at least 28 days. If 2 or more children are born at the same time, the amount of the allowance is increased by €75.69 for each child who has lived at least for 28 days. The application for this allowance must be submitted together with these documents: your residence card, birth certificate of the child, confirmation of the child's attending physician on the fact that an agreement has been concluded with him or her, and on the survival of the child for at least 28 days. Then a domicile declaration, which is a form containing information about your residence, work activity, housing situation, payment of benefits, etc. Then you must also submit a confirmation of receiving or non-receiving a similar allowance abroad if the child was born outside Slovakia. And finally, documents which are relevant in case the applicant is the father of the child, such as a death certificate of the mother, police confirmation on the search, or a decision on entrusting the child to him.
The last social benefit is the allowance for multiple child born at the same time. This allowance is a state social benefit by which the state contributes once a year to cover the increased expenses that arise in connection with the due care of more children born at the same time. A person entitled to receive the allowance is a parent or the person to whose alternative care children have been entrusted. The allowance can be received if 3 or more children are born at the same time, or if 2 or more children are born at the same time repeatedly within 2 years. The conditions for receiving the allowance are at least 3 of the children are under the age of 15, while in the case of recurrent births, the age limit of children born first in order, what are the older ones, is monitored. Second condition is children are provided with due care, and the entitled person and children have a permanent residence and domicile in Slovakia. Again, similarly to the childbirth allowance, it is not possible to apply for this benefit if you have only temporary residence in Slovakia. The amount of the allowance is 110 euros and 36 cents per year for each child from the age of 1. In the case of recurrent births, from the age of 1 of children born second in order, that are the younger ones. The application must be submitted together with following documents: residence card, birth certificates of children, confirmation from the pediatrician, confirmation from school principal on school attendance, and decision or on alternative care if it's relevant in your case.
Finally, we will talk about one form of tax benefit that you can apply if you are maintaining a dependent child, the so-called tax bonus. A person entitled to claim the tax bonus is a person paying income tax, the taxpayer. In other words, you can only claim a tax bonus if you have income from which you pay tax. You can apply the tax bonus if you maintain a dependent child, regardless of whether it is your own or adopted child, whether you have a child in alternative care or it is your spouse's child. The definition of a dependent child is the same as in the case of child allowance. It is a child until the end of compulsory schooling, even if he or she is exempted from the obligation to attend school, or until the age of 25, if he or she is studying full-time at a secondary school or university, or if he or she cannot study or perform a gainful activity due to illness or injury, or it can be a child until reaching the age of majority if he or she is unable to study or pursue gainful activity due to a long-term unfavorable health condition, and also a child which is educated in primary schools for pupils with disabilities. The conditions for applying the tax bonus are 3. As a taxpayer, you must have taxable income of at least 6 times the minimum wage. In 2020, it represents 3,480 euro. If you have taxable income from business, you cannot be operating at a loss. And the third condition, if you are a taxpayer with a limited tax liability, so-called tax non-resident, you can claim a tax bonus if at least 90% of all your income is from resources in the Slovak territory. You must demonstrate that you meet these conditions either to your employer or if you file a tax return to the tax office directly. The fact of meeting the conditions may be proved, for example, by your child's birth certificate, a certificate of school attendance, a confirmation on receiving a child allowance, etc. However, it is not necessary to submit a certificate of school attendance to the tax office if your child is attending a school in Slovakia. A copy of the birth certificate is only submitted to the tax office once, so if you have submitted it in previous years, you don't have to do it again. The amount of tax bonus is €22.72 per month for each dependent child living with you in the same household, and for the €5.44 per month for each child under 6 years of age. The income tax you have to pay is reduced by this amount, so the tax bonus can be applied only up to the amount of the tax you have to pay.
In the next part of the webinar, we will answer your questions, which you can write us in the chat. As we pointed out at the beginning, we can only answer basic questions about family benefits. In case of more detailed questions and precise calculations of individual benefits, we recommend that you contact the relevant Office of Labour, Social Affairs and Family, or a branch of the Social Insurance Agency. Questions we won't have time to answer can be emailed to mic@iom.int. You can also contact us by phone during our opening hours. So as already mentioned, feel free to write your questions in our chat.
So we can already see the first questions that appeared in the chat. Linda is asking, where do I get the domicile declaration? The answer to this question is that this form can be found on the website of the Central Office of Labour, Social Affairs and Family. But if you write us a short email, we can send you a direct link or the form to your inbox. Because it might be maybe for an external person a little challenging to find it on that website, which is mostly in Slovak. If you want us to send you the form, you can drop us an email. There is another question from Anna. Hello, me and my husband both have temporary residence permit and both have živnosť, so I mean trade license. But as mother, I cannot have the maternity benefit because I had živnosť only for 6 months before the baby. Can father apply for it? If yes, when and for how many weeks? Thank you. If the father complies with the conditions for receiving the benefit, so he must, as I told, have at least 270 days of sickness insurance before taking the child into his care, he can receive the benefit. He would need to submit to the social insurance agency an agreement between you and himself that he's taking care of the child, and he can receive the benefit for 28 weeks.
So we have another questions. Are these benefits allowed for parents staying together but not married, raising children together but not married legally? One partner is Slovak and the other one is non-Slovak. If yes, which partner can apply? Or only the mother? Well, it depends on what benefits you want to claim, but generally being married is not the condition of any of these benefits. So if you fulfill all other conditions, you can apply for the allowances.
Question is, in documentation you mentioned birth certificate, original and copy. Where do we submit the original birth certificate? Will we get it back? So the birth certificate is mostly needed for the benefits that are applied for at the Office of Labour, Social Affairs and Family. And yes, you will get it back because the officer will just needs the original and copy to check that you submit a real copy of the original, and will give you the original back.
Another question from Daniel. My baby was born in Poland, but she lives with me in Bratislava together with mom. We are not married yet. Does my baby need Slovak residence to apply for parental allowance? Baby has a Polish insurance. The condition is that only like the entitled person has to have a temporary or permanent residence in Slovakia, not the baby itself. So if you are entitled and you have a residence, you can claim this benefit.
Linda is asking if the father has permanent residence but mother has temporary and they want to apply for príspevok pri narodení, so the childbirth allowance. Is this possible? Well, the father can only apply for the benefit if the mother has died, if she is searched for, or if the child was entrusted into his care. Otherwise, only the mother can apply for this benefit. There is one question which is not entirely relevant to the topic of this webinar because we're just speaking of benefits, but I think we still have some time. So Imad is asking, if the baby is born in Slovakia, when is the born baby entitled to have a Slovak citizenship and what conditions? So in general, baby which is born in Slovakia doesn't achieve Slovak citizenship because in Slovakia there is the principle that the citizenship is inherited by parents. So at least one of the parents of the child must be a Slovak citizen, and if none of the parents is a citizen, the baby doesn't receive the citizenship by birth, with one exception. And if the child doesn't obtain a citizenship of neither of the parents, according to the laws of parent citizenship country, then the baby can subsidiarily acquire Slovak citizenship. But normally, if both parents are foreigners, the general rule is that the child doesn't acquire the Slovak citizenship.
We have another question from Anna. We have a private health insurance. Do we need to apply for Slovak state social insurance prior to applying for any of these benefits? Probably you only won't be able to apply for maternity benefit because you need to have a sickness insurance for this one, but you can apply for any other state social benefit if you meet other conditions. And you don't need to contribute to any other social system before you claim these benefits.
Jacqueline is asking that she would like to have her baby in Brazil and would need family support. So am I eligible for maternity allowance and parental allowance? How would it be with birth certificate from Brazil? Well, for maternity benefit, you must meet the conditions. So at least 270 days of sickness insurance. If you've been employed here or self-employed and meet this condition, and also others, you will be eligible if the baby is born in Brazil. And also for the parental allowance, if you have residency in Slovakia and meet the other conditions, it doesn't matter where the baby was born. Regarding the Brazilian birth certificate, it will have to be verified. Currently, I don't remember whether the Brazilian documents are probably apostilled. Yes, yeah, they're not super legalized, so the birth certificate will have to be apostilled and translated to Slovak, and it will not be a problem to use it for receiving the benefit.
So there is another question from John. If we apply for the benefits and we already stayed here for more than a year, are we able to get also those months and previous months that we supposed to have benefit, or only during the start the application of benefit is granted? Well, generally you can claim these benefits 6 months retroactively.
There is a question whether a child allowance is from 3 years of age and up, and whether the child needs to have a temporary residence in Slovakia to receive this benefit. Well, actually, not just from 3 years of age. The child allowance can be received from the moment the child was born. It is not excluded to receive it immediately. And the residency of a child is not a condition for receiving this benefit, just a permanent or temporary residence of the entitled person, so of the parent.
There is another question from Noria. Hello, I'm married and I live here over 5 years. How to apply for citizenship? Who to contact? Well, I cannot give you a precise answer to this question because I don't know if you are married to a Slovak citizen or what kind of residence do you have, but I recommend you can visit our website www.mic.iom.sk, and there you can find a section called citizenship where you can read all the details. And if you have additional questions, you can call us or you can just write email and we can give you exact answer.
There is a question from Anton. Hello, I have a slight question. There is a language barrier. In order to go to the office to apply, speak with the employee, fill the application, all the docs in Slovak, etc. How to overcome the language barrier? Yes, we understand this situation, and it is true that it may happen that the employees of the Office of Labor, Social Affairs and Family may not speak English. However, our center is not providing the service of interpreter. So in case you do not understand Slovak and you are in the place where the officers do not speak Slovak, you would need to either bring a friend, a Slovak friend, or a family member, or hire an interpreter. Unfortunately, we are not able to help with this language.
Another question from Fernando. Does receiving any of these benefits impact the possibility to continue having a temporary residence or applying for a permanent one? No, receiving of these benefits doesn't have any impact of your temporary residence. And if you will have a permanent residence, you can apply even for childbirth allowance or for the allowance for multiple children born at the same time, because these two allowances are linked only to the permanent residence. But otherwise, it doesn't have any impact.
Another question from Linda. Section H of the form for childbirth allowance is to be filled by Matričný úrad by the registry office according to where the child was born. They have to go personally to Matričný úrad to get the stamp from them, or is this sorted by the labor office? It's you who must go to the municipality where the child was born and have this part of the form filled and confirmed by the officer. And when submitting it to the labor office, it must be already there. The labor office will not sort it out for you. We need to notify the office within 8 days. I think you are asking about changes. Well, any change that might influence the receiving of the benefit, just like losing the residency status, or I don't know, for benefits where condition is that the child is in schooling. If the child is no longer in schooling, for example, after the compulsory schooling, if the child goes to work and doesn't continue at the university, all those relevant information or information that would be determining your entitlement, your right to a benefit, you must inform the office, but also let's say your bank account details or your address, any change in your data, and anything that you notify to the office. If that changes, you should notify the office again.
There is a question from Jacqueline. Hi again, regarding the insurance of 270 days. I had an issue with my visa last year and I had to pay 1 month by myself. I'm living in Slovakia since July 2015, but last year my visa was rejected and my company asked me to pay 1 month. So it is less than 270, so I won't be eligible? Well, if you mean if you are eligible for maternity benefit, there is a condition that you need to have a sickness insurance at least 270 days in the last 2 years before your entitlement arises. You have this sickness insurance if you are employed, self-employed, or you can be insured voluntarily, but the condition that you need to have this insurance for at least 270 days if you want to apply for maternity benefit. If you want to apply for any other benefit, you don't need to have this insurance at all. If you meet other conditions, of course.
All right, looks like we don't have any more questions here. So I would like to thank you all for participating in this webinar. We really hope this information was useful for you and you will be able to make use of it, apply for the benefits that you are eligible for, and we are looking forward to other meetings, other webinars. If those will be interesting for you, we'll be happy to have you with us again. Have a nice evening and goodbye.